call this meeting to order at 6:31. First item on it is the pledge of allegiance, which I believe is a flag. Yeah. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next is agenda review.
I would just say we don't need that anticipated executive session. I almost just took it off, but I figured that.
So number 5, anticipated executive session. We don't need that.
So our lawyer is not coming.
We decided that's one, we don't have funds to hire a lawyer at this point, because the other thing we can do is pay for elections, and 2, we feel a lot of the issues within the that the lawyer is pertaining to is more specific to Franklin and Highgate, the people who are within the lawsuit.
Okay.
This particular board is not in that lawsuit, so
right.
I don't think it pertains to us in the same manner. Or we don't.
Mr. Chairman, I noticed that we had a potential executive session and we have decided we probably aren't going to need that. Then I'd ask under other business and public session, I'd like to talk a little bit about executive sessions. But I don't mind doing it in public session. I would defer to the superintendent if she thinks that's inappropriate. But,
no, I mean, I have the Vsba Code of Ethics for us to have, so it might be an opportunity to talk then.
Okay, that's good.
So under new business, you'd like to talk about executive session? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Or other business?
Other businesses.
Okay.
Other businesses.
Correspondence from or public comments? Okay. On to consent agenda approval of the meeting minutes from May 1st.
I have one question, and of course I didn't print the notes. There's a bit in there, or it says Eric asked a question, and I think I asked it. Okay. I don't know if that matters.
No, let's change it. I wasn't sure who asked it. I thought it was Eric, but I'm glad to change it to you, Megan.
I just need to find where that was.
While she's looking for that, can I get a motion for approving the minutes? A second?
Yes.
Sorry, I jumped
Discussion?
I think I remember that.
Okay. Oh, there it is. Under process for filling the board member seats. What happens if no incidents petition?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. No problem.
Any other adjustments? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes as adjusted, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Old business, the MVSD merged budget.
Excuse me.
From last time, perfect. It's the exact same draft that you had in front of you last time.
So there's no changes?
Changed anything. Dawn came in with a few questions, Eric emailed with a few questions.
So in reading this, I guess I was, this pertains to the Franklin local budget, the question that I had. And that was, that the budget was approved last week by the voters. Is this budget amount nearly 2 million reflected in the MVSD budget? So, I guess if I could read your response, because I tried.
I can paraphrase if you want, whatever you
Okay,
prefer.
yeah, if you
Yeah.
can, because I read it and I really didn't fully
Oh,
understand.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it's a little bit convoluted. So everything that is in the local budget, that's sort of, think of it as like on-site, in-house, whatever. So all those instructional costs, plant, all of those are the same. The adjustments that the Franklin board made, the increases that they added, or things that they adjusted are all the same. The only costs that would look different are the shared costs, which are your assessments. Because Franklin had to go under, operate under some assumptions because they had adopted a local budget quite a while ago now. And they were assuming that Sheldon would still be a part of our supervisory union in that scenario. Whereas if we merge, and the assumption we're operating under now is that Sheldon would not be a part of that and we wouldn't have assessments. So those shared costs look a little bit different. Taking Sheldon out of the equation and removing the factor of them being assessments, assessed on things like enrollment and such, which changed proportionally for Franklin. But all the local costs are the same.
Okay.
So for instance, the increase they made to facilities in the plant line is still there. All those increases are still there. It's their supply line. But ECP, for instance, or even we'll take central office, it's a little bit easier. Taking Sheldon out of the equation, since the central office assessment is based on, or is assessed based on enrollment, with Sheldon, the assessment that Franklin would have to pay would be less because Sheldon would pick up a portion of that. Without Sheldon, they wouldn't. The MVSD budget is operating with the assumption that Sheldon's not part of it. And there's not assessments. So it's not based on just enrollment.
There's no, just all the costs for each of the schools and the shared services like early childhood and special education and the superintendent's office, those are just in the budget as part of the cost for equalized pupil. We're in a local budget, those get divided up into particular assessments, and Sheldon in or out makes a difference there.
Right.
So the amount that Franklin voted in last week, we can say that those funds are for Franklin School, are going to stay in Franklin School, except for the assessments, is what you're saying.
What we can say is that those allocations right now have been pooled together with all the other school districts by line into one budget. How they're expended moving forward is to be determined by the MVSD board. But that was what we used to build the budget. Took everybody's local budget at the point they were at and pulled them together.
So all of the teachers, all of the supplies, all of the plants, custodial service, all of those are in this budget. For Franklin, for Swanton, for Highgate.
And MVU's
And
building
MVUs.
project and Highgate's building project. those are-
Yep. Absolutely.
I don't know if that was clear when the vote was made,
Is what was clear.
what you just said. If everybody that in Franklin that voted, if that was clear that, I mean, I think the way it was presented and the way that, I think there's some question as to if those funds are for Franklin schools, like before this whole merge thing, right?
Right.
If the budget that gets voted on, that stays in the school, that's to fund the school, that's to fund everything, you know, everything. If that's commingled with this budget here, I don't know if people realize that.
Well,
I think
they're
there's some
two
question.
separate things completely. So
Yeah.
if there is no merger, the Franklin Town School District had authority from the voters of Franklin to expend that money that was voted on last Tuesday. If there's a merger and no more Franklin Town School budget, then there's only a merged budget and a merged district budget. So they're
Okay.
completely separate things.
Okay.
But one was built from the information from the Franklin budget as well as Swanton and Highgate.
Okay, so there, that's the
Yeah.
connection, yes, that's,
Yeah.
So it's part of how it was constructed, but
Right.
none of the dollars, whether it came over here as part of Swanton, Highgate, Franklin, MVU, none of it's earmarked by school except for some special projects.
that was my question.
Just being the nature of a large.
The real wild card here is Sheldon. Once you lose somebody, then you still have to, you can't say, well, we're going to now have a 14/16 business manager and a 13/16 superintendent, and you have to maintain the office. That wasn't our choice, but that's what the state said.
Or curriculum director, special ed director,
Yeah,
all
oh,
OT, PT, like all those things,
And there were changes, obviously, where they made sense.
Oh, yeah, no, I understand that, but I think of Enosburg now, they get another town. Well, it's not Enosburg, it's Franklin Northeast, or whatever they call it. Those are the cards we were dealt.
Yes.
I have a quick question on the funds. So, along with what Devin had said, that it's not earmarked, but it is true that funds we have allotted for specific items are still going to those programs. So, like this one, playground money, that's
Oh,
not
yes,
going
absolutely.
there.
Yeah,
and-
that was raised for a very
Okay.
specific purpose. I think he's talking about general
Okay.
funds that are raised from tax dollars. And I would say that they are earmarked, they're just not promised, because we don't know what's gonna happen. It's no different than in your budget, say you had 20,000 in repair and maintenance and 10,000 in supplies, but all of a sudden you needed more repair and maintenance. You just move the money and you're allowed to do that. The same theory would happen in a merged budget. If Franklin needed something and MVU had some extra money, they might, we might move the money differently.
How, usually our meeting in June, we talk about potential carryover at the local level. For years, we've been doing that. How are we handling carry? I mean, have you projected what you think the carrier is going, what was going to be?
I'm in the process of fine tuning that. Spending has gone a little bit later this year than it typically does. There's also some administrative tasks and financial tasks that I have to try to work through as we think about merging. For instance, health insurance, I think I brought this up at some of the meetings, where getting on the right cycle, we technically pay for a different 12 months than what we should be paying for. Is now the right time to get caught up with that? That would mean a school would need to eat an extra, pay for an extra 2 months of health insurance this year. Financially, if we could do that, it would be the best thing, merging. So I'm still trying to work through those kind of issues from a business perspective. But at the next meeting, I'm planning on bringing that information, but I might have a different idea or a different suggestion on how that money gets spent. Then
So all schools have like 2 more board meetings, May and June, regular May meeting. So everybody has 2 local meetings to go.
I would also caution that we don't want to spend the carryover down to nothing, because you will feel the impact of that. If everyone typically has carryover in their own tax rate, and all of a sudden they don't have carryover going into this merge, then the tax rate's going to be a much more significant increase, not this coming year, but the following year, when we don't have that revenue.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, so we don't want to cut off our nose to spite our face.
Any more questions?
The VSBA dues, where are those specifically in here?
At the end of the board.
Yeah, it's 2310, line 810, on page 5.
Yeah.
So I get, there's been some discussion about that, as to what exactly do we get for that kind of money. I know you can debate it either way, but specifically, I would really like to know what it is, what benefit that we get, what we've gotten in the past for that. And if we should go a different route.
I took Jay's comment. Jay raised this issue.
Mhm.
Are you getting it?
Franklin.
Franklin? And so I took it back to the meeting. We had to talk about one Wednesday night. And the executive director said she certainly, or someone would be glad to come out and meet with the youth players board and specifically speak to things that they have done. There's a general thing, if you go on the website, it talks in general terms.
No, I understand that, but specifically, what has it done for this district? How have we benefited from those
Probably right
things?
now, you'd say you haven't benefited, but we have tried to make certain on Act 46 we stayed neutral, but there are people in the state that don't believe that, and I question myself. But I think over the years, they've been a legislative force that have prevented some things happening that would have not been beneficial for a school. I know this year they've been lobbying on lead paint, for example, not lead paint, but lead in the water.
Yeah.
And I think that they have been able to change some of the baseline regulations, and they're fighting hard to get it funded because I think originally came up the funding was only like 50% the local schools had to pick up. So I know that is one issue. They do help with superintendent searches, even though we do pay them a stipend.
Well, we hired a facilitator, was it Bob Stevens, and we had to pay him, so I don't remember the VSBA providing anything during that process, or who that was of any value.
I mean, that's a matter of opinion, but the other thing is that there are times when it comes down to negotiations, they're available for legal opinions. Sometimes I would say they've done a good job of trying to balance between making sure that employees have, I would call it certainly a good, but a reasonable insurance plan, both dental and health, and keep in mind the costs. But no, you raise a valid concern. But I know.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's other options out there, and that a lot of schools are going with.
I'd like to hear about it. Yes.
Well, there's the newly formed Vermont Alliance of School Board, and a lot of schools have opted out of going with the VSBA and have gone with them, just because they feel like they're getting more representation with the Act 46, and they have a strong voice. So with the executive director of VSBA, she's been very wishy-washy on numerous occasions as to how the agency or the association sides with Act 46, specifically lately with the H39 delay and such. So I know that's created a lot of havoc within that group. I guess it's nothing that we're going to resolve tonight, obviously, and that's okay, but I would like the board to consider other options, and in the future, looking at doing something different and not going with the VSBA.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
So I can definitely understand the questions as you were speaking. I think in my head I was thinking more along the lines of, okay, if we leave, if we don't do membership, what would we actually lose? It's not like if we step away from the VSBA, it's not like we're not going to still benefit from their work in the legislature. But then I also am wondering, is it really about the VSBA, or are people just trying to, throw the book at them only because of Act 46? Is it just a response to that, or is it really the history of the organization?
Well, I think it's our responsibility to do our due diligence and look at what's being spent in the district. And yeah, we're looking at a budget of what, $38 million. This is only like 12,000 and change, but you have to look at everything. That's a lot of money to me. I don't know about you, but that's a lot of money to me. And if we're not reaping any of the benefits of you know, this membership and paying these dues, I don't see a point in really, like you say, what are we getting out of it? I mean, from stepping out of it, are we really losing anything?
Right.
I really don't think so. I haven't seen specifically how these guys have benefited us, especially lately, but even in the past.
Has anybody, any of the chairs participated in the annual school board training for board chairs? I think it's required, isn't it, that school board chairs will do a training organized by the
No, it's
VSBA?
coming up next week.
Coming up next
If
week?
anybody wants to come with me.
We've had people.
I know that's one thing I don't know. Eric, I don't disagree with you that we should look at it, but I'm really concerned about the information you shared, because I was at the meeting last month, and only one school district in the state has withheld the dues this year. And whether they're gonna pay them and wait or not pay them, but everybody else has paid their dues. So to say they're leaving them and going to another organization is not true. It's not true as a month ago. Now, last month, if they left, I don't know. But I hear that little song and dance.
What about 2018?
2018, there might have been one, but I think everybody paid. I think, like you said, everybody did. But it's not like there's a landslide of people leaving. I also, as a board member, don't always agree with executive director anymore, and I always agree with our superintendent. But the majority of the people have supported it. And there is a small group of us who said that we should have been more neutral on this most recent delay thing. And we tried to get the language changed and softened a bit, but the majority said no, and they went from there. But I think it's a good discussion to have, and VSBA, there are 2 or 3 people, legal services, as well as the board development, more than willing to come out and spend an hour with us at some future date, and if we decide to take it out. But I don't like to make decisions based on erroneous information. And it's not me personally, but I think wherever you get information, it's not accurate.
Is any of it mandated? I mean, is it mandated to school boards?
What's that?
Is it mandated at all through school boards that we have to be?
No, we don't. There was one time it was related to some of the health insurance plans, and VSBA was a strong advocate for the different plans, trying to make certain in bargaining that we didn't go with a gold platinum plan. But that was more general information and training for board members. But we don't have to. No. And I think that another year around, if we want to bring that up, and have the board decide, I would ask if somebody come and talk with us that's performing the job too.
One benefit I feel that we get from, it might be minor, but having been involved in negotiations, they do help quite a bit with that. I mean, they're not there, but they do provide us information that's helpful, very helpful. I mean, I'm not sure if it's worth the money we pay them, but it is a benefit, for sure. And I don't disagree that looking at other options is never a bad thing. I mean, education is the best thing we can do. But back to budget, possible action, or do we want to adopt this budget tonight, or?
Well, everyone at last week, sounds like a month ago, last week said, I'd like a week to look at it. I had some questions, I met with Laura, got answers, and so I'll make a motion so that we can continue our discussion. To approve the budget as indicated, and Laura, state the amount, please, so everybody can hear it. I've got it here, but if you would,
$37,001. I'm sorry, $37,001,935.
that's it. Number that I'm losing.
I'll second.
Discussion.
Motion would actually need to be the article language. I have that prepared if you'd like that, just so you know what it would say.
It would say, shall the voters of the Missisquoi Valley School District approve the school directors to expend $37,001,935, which is the amount the school directors have determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year. It is estimated that this proposed budget, if approved, will result in education spending of $15,158 for equalized pupils. Right?
I'm sorry. I didn't.
So, any discussion?
I have a question. I know there was a lot of talk about what exactly they would see and we would be sharing at the informational meeting about not just this giant number and like you have here, school-based versus the district-based. Is that something that we'll have to share with folks? I just feel like that people are gonna ask like, well, great, $37 million, but what does that mean for SWAT?
I think there's different ways to break it down. I'm
Yeah.
not sure if I would suggest separating out the shared, what used to be shared cost and what now is school-based costs,
Okay.
because technically most of those shared costs are school-based costs as well.
Okay.
Like, for instance, your curriculum director, your special educators, those are all, I think oftentimes we think of those as like the central office or whatever, but it's not. It's people in your school too. It's just costs that have been shared in the past. So, but there are ways that we can inform the voters. I think Julie and I have talked about, how much is truly like instructional, charts and graphs and, how much is the salary line, salary and benefits out of this, or, there's different ways to pull information together. Definitely open for suggestion. I wouldn't recommend splitting it out this way because truly it's not a good representation anymore. We used to do it because we had assessments. We don't anymore.
But I do think, should the board approve and adopt this budget, then we need to talk about how we're going to inform the public, going on Channel 15. I don't know, I was thinking Megan might want to go on Channel 15.
I think that sounds like something perfect.
Well, Chris is very busy, but, no, I mean, that's for the board to discuss. But we talked about, sharing responsibilities. And I just picked on you because you're sitting next to me. But I think that there's, a lot of, we want to do a lot of informing. We want to see different ways we can represent, because we will be representing things differently. But people want to know, have there been any changes in my school? Are there extra teachers? Are there fewer teachers? Are they exactly the same? That kind of information we want to make sure people have. A great example would be MVU's going to have a math coach being paid for with grant funds. Math has been a big area of challenge at MVU, and the boards and this board hopefully will be supporting that focus too. So that kind of change in particular, I think would be important. Facility and maintenance, all those different sort of areas of the budget we should talk about. So people, if they see a number, I think of the first time that special ed was consolidated, and instead of seeing, $1 million in my school, they saw $10 million for 5 schools. That's a big number. When you see that that's 60 special educators and this many paras and this many kids and 600 students and, all of that, people go, oh, well, then now that makes sense to me. So we'll have to work to make sure we do that.
Any other discussion or question? Hearing none, all those in favor of, shall the voters of the Missisquoi Valley District approve the school directors to expend $37,001,935, which is the amount the school directors have determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year. It is estimated that this proposed budget, if approved, will result in education spending of $15,158 per equalized pupil. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Abstentions? Motion carries 5-1. Warning approval. Now, we're looking for approval of this whole.
Yes, I think the only thing is the information, budget information meeting dates.
Setting the date.
The other articles are quite standard.
So the first article is to have school directors, a 3-year term from Franklin, a 2-year term from Highgate, and a 1-year term from Swanton. Is that correct, everybody?
Yes.
That was my recollection, but I wanted to double check.
The other one is the use of school buildings, that's
Yeah.
not something historically that we've
What you tend to put in there. Article 3, which you just approved.
This one is to borrow money in anticipation of taxes, we would still need to do that.
And then the transaction of other business. Again, those are standard articles. The real piece on this is picking an informational hearing meeting. We toyed around with June 4th, which is the first Tuesday of the month, which would be your first board meeting of June. And we also made copies for other days of the week. With Australian ballot, you need to meet within 10 days of the budget. So I believe the 10th day would be a Saturday, and I don't know that that was particularly well attended, so you may want it to be a Tuesday evening of your board meeting, and maybe move your board meeting up a little bit to 6 o'clock, and then have the informational meeting at 7. I don't know. Tuesday was the date that just last week people said worked better, so.
4th was a day that was out there that we might be having a budget meeting, so maybe people will, right? And then when we had, we were here back in March, we were talking about June, so I think the 4th is a good day.
All right, now we're going to do one meeting, or we're going to do 2 like we did for the Articles of Agreement? I mean, the first meeting was fairly well attended, the second meeting was not much.
I think a Saturday as your student gets in, all spring sports is going to be really tough to get everybody on a Saturday.
I think we're going to reach more people with that anyway. Pure, I just said that if we did the presentation on Channel 15 that you were talking about earlier, we probably reach more people than, or as many people at least as we do with these info meetings.
We need to make sure it gets out there.
Huh?
We need to make sure it gets out there.
Pardon? Yes.
So I check that Channel 15 quite often, and I hardly ever see it. Sheldon's on there a lot.
There are places in the district that don't get Channel 15.
Yeah, that's something else that, we had paid money to
Right.
Channel 15 to have all of our stuff on YouTube, and I have a hard time finding meetings.
Are we not getting the links on the websites, on the school websites?
I'm not, I look on Highgate and Franklin Northwest, and I have a hard time finding all the meetings. You can
Well-
find spotty here and there, but.
For one thing, should we be merged, it'll be a lot easier because one person will be managing one website and one, where it can go. So that'll be a little bit easier. It's probably too many different people in each building, and perhaps the person who used to put it on the Highgate website isn't there anymore. So I will look into that because that's really annoying when, we do something so that people can be informed and then
I
it's
haven't
not
seen
out
anything
there.
on there about us in months.
Well, let's fix it.
Yeah, that's become an issue.
I know that
Thank you.
a couple years ago, one of the informational meetings, it was on Facebook Live too, because I watched
We could do
it.
both, if we do it through Channel 15, we could do both. You take that link and you put it on the website and you put it on Facebook, so you
Okay.
can do both.
Because I remember watching it,
And-
and because we don't have cable, so I don't get.
And I remember
get
when
Channel 11
Lynn had
either.
done it for MDU,
Yes.
you put it right on the front page of Franklin Northwest, so I think that's what we need to do, is that we should put it on the front page where it's
Yes.
really well seen, and Facebook, and then I'm just throwing this out there, just as ideas, and we'll follow up, make sure it happens too, just so, like, we're not, because I think what happens is when you have so many different districts, and you have to keep, and to try to keep checking, because you're checking to see if other people are doing their things, and I agree, they're hard to find.
Yeah, it was definitely helpful to be able to do it as part of, not just, going to a link, but actually, so somebody in the room was doing the live, so people were asking questions, and whomever was in charge of it was responding and things. So I know for me, it was really helpful because I couldn't get there and I don't have 15. So definitely something I would recommend looking into. I'm happy to do that as well.
So first, I guess I need a motion to approve our warning.
We got to set a date.
Oh, that's right, I'm sorry.
It's June
June
4th.
4th, I'm good with June 4th if the rest of the board is at 7, like we normally do.
I
Yeah.
think if we take those extra steps, I don't think a second meeting is necessary.
I would agree also. Well, look at that, it's right here, June 4th at 7 p.m. Good to go then. So, now that we have an informational meeting scheduled, I would entertain a motion to approve this warning.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the warning with our informational meeting being on June 4th at 7 p.m. here in, I would assume the library, the Inview Library, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0.
I have a copy of the warning, I'll pass it around for board signatures.
The discussion we had with the websites and where to find things also brings up something I've been thinking about, that as a merged district, should we have one person that's in charge of getting information on the websites? So if we don't find something, we have somebody we can just email or call or?
Yes,
Would
I
that be the
agree.
clerk?
Could be. We are looking as we merge, can't see people in my reading list, oh, I'm sorry. We're looking as we merge at having the tech department come together and sort of talk about those kinds of things. Because we have people in some schools that are really good at web and some people in other schools that don't, but they do it as a side thing. So I think that we will have a point person for those kinds of things.
Because I think
We're
that
not
would
going
create.
to have a webmaster, but we
Right.
certainly have one person in the district, in the tech department that is very good at it and will probably take primary responsibility for it.
'Cause I think that would improve our information
Yep.
issue that we have. Because that's the one thing, even at our last information meeting, people told us we're just not getting information out of it. So if we can improve that, I think that's
We
a
absolutely can,
large
and
step.
should.
Okay, on to new business, the VSBA Code of Ethics.
So whether it comes from the VSBA or not, it's a good code of ethics for school board members. And Chris and I talked. It's been my experience that we usually have this signed at board meetings when they start. And I probably have one in my other bag. When we organize. This is a new board, it's for everyone, because everyone here's been on a board, but it's a different board, different number of people, different focus, different way of working together, so it's a good opportunity to just go through and think about our role as a board, working together, as an activity as a board to maybe even make a motion supporting these key things and sign off on them. And it's also a good opportunity afterwards to talk about whether you want a board retreat or not, and what purpose that, what you'd like to get out of that. I'm sure all of you have seen these before. One of the things that the SBA does do is train new board members and send out materials to board members on the role of a school board.
The only thought I had about adopting this tonight would be the fact that we're missing 3 board members. So I'm wondering if this is something we should revisit once we have a full
In
board.
June.
Any other?
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I think this is a good idea. I think we should have a full board.
Such an odd situation to be in with
It is a little different.
2/3 of the board in place.
Essentially, it itemizes our oath, correct? Kind of spells it out.
In a
in
way,
detail.
really, it does, yes. Just talking about how you work together and, you know, what I love about this group of people and all the boards that we have. Somebody was asking me today about the year and how the boards have been, and I really respect all of you. You all respect one another, even when you disagree. And, you know, I can't say enough about all of you being highly ethical people. So I think it is nice, though, when you come together to be able to set some goals or work, discuss how you want to do business with one another. But I'm certainly not worried about, I have been an administrator in places where people weren't necessarily respectful of one another on the board. And it's nice to know that those aren't issues here.
Well, Chris, in regards to waiting to the next meeting, what if we don't have the full board then too? Do we want to cover it?
I didn't say wait till the next meeting. I said wait till we have a full board. I mean,
Okay.
we would obviously have to be after the election on June 11th. So, I mean, it would have to be the meeting following June 11th.
There's nothing mandatory or anything stopping us from doing our duties as members anyway.
Oh, yeah.
right?
You're all sworn in.
We're all living under this as individual school board members.
Yes,
Yeah.
you are.
If you represent Swan, you've taken this, side of this board, this is people, for the benefits of your community people, and you board and all that.
Right.
So I think you're wise in waiting, and we got, you know, we have some committees we need to fill, like, once we get a full board, do this, I think that's good.
Right. So we can do our second organizational meeting after the second round of elections.
Yes.
Okay, on to food service contracts.
Okay, so I'll be talking about this at the local level as well, but as Chris knows, Highgate was recently informed that they are not able to renew their food service management contract because it's the first fixed price contract that we've had in our school district, and actually one of the first in the state, and they're actually losing money. And so that has prompted some discussion with my office and the child nutrition program at the state of Vermont. And because of our merger situation and the situation in Highgate, they're requesting that we consider pooling our food service management contracts into one RFP and going out to bid for one. So it would be Highgate, MVU, and Swanton. Franklin doesn't have a food service management company, so they would not be part of that equation. They have an in-house program. But just pooling our food service management company contract is allowable, and I guess it's the recommendation that we look at doing that. MVU and Swanton have another year or two on their renewals. It's always a one-year contract with the possible of 4 additional renewals, but we basically would be going out to bid this year, next year, and the following year. So the state's just saying that we should strongly consider pooling them now. What that looks like exactly, I have a lot to figure out around that. But I guess I'm looking for the board's consideration of doing that rather than just doing Highgate this year, MVU, and Swanton. Being a fixed price, the hope is that we would get more bids and make the process more competitive. Right now, we don't really get a lot of interest. It's typically, not that we're unhappy with the Abbey, they've been wonderful in our schools and providing a great program, but it's always nice to have competitiveness. So if we pooled those 3 schools together, I guess the hope is that we might solicit some more
Does
interest.
the Abbey currently provide for all 3 schools?
We don't ever get anyone else to bid.
Right.
And again, I'm not speaking poorly of the Abbey, but oftentimes I'm required to try to solicit as many as I can. I call, I email, I do everything but drive there and beat on their door. And I can't not big enough. They're going after hospitals and college, university accounts, not hiding. But maybe if we pulled it together, we might be able to. And it just saves administratively a lot of work on our end. Food service programs require a lot of oversight now, as they should, but it would be easier to manage. And all the schools would just pay a flat per meal price.
Would any of those schools be interested in evaluating having an in-house service and growing that within the local district? Is this a good time to evaluate that?
My professional opinion is no, because it's a lot of work. It's a huge undertaking. Most in-house programs, there are some successful in-house programs out there, but they actually have a food service program manager, either district-wide or in the school. Oftentimes there's a commitment of local funds to be able to cash flow. Not that we wouldn't ever look at it, I don't know if right now, in the middle of all of this other change, would be the time to also take that on. Because it truly is a change in thinking if you were going to do that in a SU-wide or even in a larger school. There are some really great in-house programs out there, but they're becoming less and less viable. Yep.
And I had the exact opposite question was, why is Franklin not part of it? Does the electorate get to say whether or not they want to continue with an in-house or go into something that I have no idea about the finances, but may save money?
It's always the choice of the school board, always.
Okay.
The school board has the prerogative to set the comp lunch price, who you contract with in-house. Franklin has had a very successful in-house program, but it does require some subsidy. Franklin subsidizes health insurance for their staff, but they're small enough that that's not a huge cost. But they do subsidize from their general fund for the cost of the health insurance. So that would be part of your MVSD budget. But it's a wonderfully successful program. We had an admin review there last year, and the state did everything but, they lay down flowers for them. It was something special, yeah. So.
I would like to have this discussion at our Swanton School Board next week. Are we in Swanton next week?
In a couple weeks.
Couple weeks?
Yeah, unfortunately, the timeline, you have to follow a very strict timeline with the state. I am bringing it there, but if I could get the approval here, like even contingent upon the approval at the local levels, it would allow us to start to move forward. You have to warn it for at least 30 days, more like 45 is what they prefer. It has to go in the paper 3 different times. The RFP has to be approved by the state before you can even launch the RFP. It takes a long time. So to have something in place by July 1 is going to be tight.
Do we need it by July 1? We serve at lunch?
We do actually serve meals year-round.
We do? Is
Yeah.
that through the summer?
Yep. Yep. We serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So probably 11 and a half out of the 12 months a year.
Is there any reason why we would not want to do a merged?
I don't believe so. We can track everything that even if you wanted to still track it separately, the state's saying you don't have to, but still point of sale systems, free and reduced price hot lunch information, all of that would still be tracked separately. It's just, when I file a claim, it would be one claim. It's one contract that you'd be operating under instead of 3 different cycles all the time. I think it gives us better volume, so maybe we would attract a better rate.
Bigger contract brings more interest.
Hy-Vee is the one that's kind of has to follow through with this process. MVU and Swan, it would be another year, and then the year after would be, I don't remember which one's which, MVU and then Swan, I think. But the merger is really why they're saying to look at it.
Yeah, because I think, didn't we just do Highgate not too long ago?
Yeah, you
Yeah,
did.
yeah,
It was the
it's
first
just
ever fixed price contract,
Oh.
and they're losing money. The food service management contract is losing money.
It's a nice program.
I have one question about at the board level, at the local board levels, because by July 1, if everything stays on pace, they won't be there. So would this be this board's decision, or is that because it's still all in the air?
I asked the state that question, they said talk to your legal counsel, because just like any other, and whatever they said is what the state will follow. So I think either way, but I know how near and dear this is to the local schools' heart too, so I want to have the conversation in both places, but ultimately, yes, I think it's an MVSD decision probably to move forward. But
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously, should each local board determine that they, Highgate will need to, but if Swanton and View say, no, we want to wait and do it, and then we'll catch up in year 4 or whenever it is, the MVSD would inherit that cycle, those cycles. Because there'd be more.
See, that, I guess that's one of my worries too, is that if we have MVU and Swanton go to bid now, I mean, are we more apt to end up in a higher contract, a more expensive contract right off, or if we waited 2 years, would it be less in the long run?
I don't think so.
About
I think
same.
I'm hoping that the volume, securing the volume and having some competitiveness, hopefully will draw in some other bids, will actually get our prices down. I don't know if that's gonna happen. There's a lot of things that come into play with a food service
It's
management
similar to
contract.
having 2 busing companies where it kind of keeps everybody honest. Is that how you're?
Competition.
At least I would get another bid. Right now, we get one bid, and we award because we have to feed kids.
Right.
And the state just told me that the fixed price rate that Abby gave us in Highgate was one of the lowest in the state. So and our hot lunch prices are very low, so we're very aware of that. We try really hard to have a good program at a low price. This just happens to be a little too low. I think you can't cash flow.
Okay. I would entertain, sorry?
And I appreciate your optimism. But I would say, based on what limited knowledge I have, I think you're going to be dealing with the same number of bidders, because you're going to have to go to multiple sites. It's not like all of a sudden all the kids are going to be at one site. Anyway,
Yeah.
so I'm not against it. I just think that it's a change that needs some thought, but the majority wants it also.
I guess I worry as well about if we've got 3 schools having the same program, what eventually happens to Franklin when there's no more local board? And essentially it's this board that makes the decision as to what happens to the program in Franklin. I mean, you just said that it's, for an in-school program, it's pretty top-notch. I can't disagree with you. But that doesn't mean that, we would sacrifice that to get it even lower bid, because now, like you say, you're adding more volume, and maybe now there's another, somebody else coming into play and providing another quote.
I mean, I think that hints at kind of maybe the larger task that this board is going to have here, especially in the first few years, where we're dealing with schools that have different programs that they prize, but they are different than the other 3. And I think it's our duty to make sure we're not making everyone the same for the sake of making them the same. If we can take those things that are working in one place, spread them to the others if they work there, that makes sense. But I'm afraid we're going to get tempted into this sort of race to the bottom, where we start pulling the good things that stand up as different from each of the schools, and I think that's a mistake. And we're going to find those things in every school as we really dig into this and get to know all the other schools. And so I hope that when it comes to the school lunch in particular, we take that point of view. I don't know what the right answer is when we get into that in the long term, but I hope with that and with many other things we're going to look at, I hope we're not saying, let's make it the same for the sake of making it the same. Let's look at each thing, on its merit, and if it's great, let's let it stay. And if it's valued by that community and that school, let it stand, as long as it's not, so.
I agree 100%, and that's a good thing that you said that, because I think this new board needs to change its way of thinking, and not just Like, let's all just, you know, because we're merged, throw us all together and everybody be the same. I mean, look at what makes each one of our schools different, and basically reap the rewards of each, and pull those resources in to make our schools better. So that makes me feel better, knowing that there's another board member that feels that way. I don't think we should lose sight of that. It's really important.
I think it's important too to remember that it's this group plus 3 to be determined, and I think in my experience at least, I feel like we have a really good back and forth, and so like for me, I trust all of you and fighting for what's best for the kids and the school, and I definitely agree. I don't think we should just whitewash everything, because then who are we, right?
And I'm also not saying you shouldn't ask the question.
Right.
Because
Yeah,
you
yeah.
should.
Don?
So I'm going to ask you a question. As we were going through this, did I understand that the Franklin people who get health insurance, person or people, I don't need to know how many, that's in this budget?
Yes.
Okay, can you tell me where? I think
It should be
I know.
almost at the end. Sorry. It should be one of the last pages.
I think I know where it is, but I don't want to guess.
Yep. Under food service support, 3,100 on page 8. That $15,000. Not all of it though, because there's some other equipment money. I think that Highgate has some equipment money too. So I'd say about 12,500 to 13,000
So it
is.
says health insurance, 6183.
Yeah, but then you have the HRA also,
Right.
and then the repair and maintenance and the equipment, some of that. But if you just want to look at the first 2 lines, that would be just the health insurance.
All right.
Yeah. I totally understand what you're saying. This, I don't feel like would change that way of thinking. This is truly more on the administrative side. We would be managing one contract. Their program choices, and maybe I didn't say that clearly, would all still remain the same. So NBU could serve different things in their lunch. They could have more service lines if they want to. Their hot lunch price could be a different price than the elementary school. All those programmatic quality things would still stay the same. It's more those administrative functions. We would be managing one contract. The fixed rate price per plate price would be the same. So I didn't want you to think that the state was suggesting that we should try to just throw everybody into one contract and treat them all the same, because they love in-house programs, the AOA does, so, and they know how good Franklin is. It's more just easier to manage on him.
Each school can charge a different price for it, all.
Yeah, if that's what we want to do and that's what works better for us, yes.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion to adopt, or to allow the business office to pursue one food service contract for Highgate, Swanton, and MU.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
A second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of allowing the business office to pursue one food service contract between Highgate, Swanton, and MVU, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Required policies, first reading.
So, this is the first time you're seeing them all together. And I printed them because what I've done is created a Google Team Drive that I can't share with you because everybody has outside of our school district domain email addresses. So, fix that, no worries. But I wanted to make sure that you had them so you could look at them, and then I wanted you to have hard copies, just because I know how hard it is with email and printing and, various versions.
I do have one question about what you just said with the outside our domain. It's the new domain for MVSD that we're outside of?
No, we don't have our email yet. We have purchased a domain site, but the email, we're still working through what that process will be. But once we have new email, the school board will be given email addresses to conduct school business. When you're conducting school business, or when you're using your school district Google email, not the way it happened before where people went off and made their own private Google. If it's within the domain, it'll be mbsdvt.org, because there was no, MVSD was taken. And you try spelling out Missisquoi, that's not going to be helpful, okay? So we'll be all on the phone trying to spell our email addresses out. So when you're in that, then anything shared within that domain in a drive or a Google Doc people work on is confidential and FERPA protected. So you can have a working drive like that where the policies the board is looking at and reviewing would all be in one place, for example. And so that's my hope in the future. And then, of course, the new website will have all of the policies, both those that are adopted and then any under consideration. And they're being posted now. Again, we're working through who's posting those.
All these policies are the same policies we operate under now.
Not necessarily. These are all the mandated policies. Some of the ones that we have are not current in Franklin Northwest. Some of them had more procedure in them than required, so I'm happy to talk through those that are, and I did not compare each policy to the Franklin Northwest policies, because there were a lot, there were some of them that were older, so I thought we'd start from scratch. There were a couple I looked at, because when I looked at the mandated policy, there was a lot of procedure in there that was unnecessary and it was different from my recollection, so there were a couple that I did change from the mandated.
Are they pretty much based on the VSBA model policies?
They are almost identical, except, I mean, some of them are identical except for the Missisquoi Valley School District is put in.
I know that is one benefit. I don't know the last time it was updated, but I do know that what one of this company would make sure that school districts could have a policy that is passed muster.
They update them regularly. If you like, I can just go through not every single like word for word each policy, but what each one is. We also, our policies on Franklin Northwest use the old coding system. So you will see that there's a change. And the way they're set up in here on this site that you don't have yet, but policies fall under board operations, A, B for personnel, C, student policy, D, instruction, E, school community relations, and F, non-instructional operations, things like facility use and things like that. Then I'm going to I have models under consideration. That's where I put the VSBA drafts. Any procedures we work on afterwards we can put in there. And oh no, that's where the templates are. So right now we need to make sure that we have mandated policies in place for July 1. Recommended and others for consideration. There are a lot of other policies that are important for us to look at as well, and we'll do those through the coming months.
Should we have a policy review committee for the board once we have a full board?
Well, that's a question for you all. Do we want to do that and then have that committee come here, or do you want to work through these as a board? Where if you have 2 meetings a month, maybe one of them you set aside some of the time to work. I mean, right now we've got a chunk. In the future, we're going to have 2 per month that we're looking at. And we could do that as a full board, or you could have a committee, and that is really up to you.
So is there we need to have this done by July 1st, is that right?
Yes.
This stack, so.
And these are real, I mean, I'll talk through through them broadly with you, have you look at them, and then hopefully at the next board meeting, you'll be able to decide whether you want to adopt some of them, all of them, but, you know, through June, you may want to break them up. The majority of them are straightforward boilerplate. You have to have one that says this, and we do. Behaving, harassment, and bullying one is a great example for students. You don't change one word of that policy. That's except to put in our local phone numbers and addresses of folks. Other policies, it's mandated you have one. A good example was, you know, the one I'm thinking of. Proficiency-based graduation requirements. The one we have now has a lot of procedure in it that's unnecessary. The one that was on the website was different and had a bunch of procedure. I looked at a couple other school districts. They took all that procedure out and just have a paragraph that says we'll have them. And that's really all that's required.
Is any of this a result of our audit and some of the findings of being compliant or anything like this? Is there anything in there?
Fiscally? Like a fiscal audit here?
No. There, let's see, where was it? Probably 2 years ago? There was an audit done on our compliance. Certain policies were not in place.
Well, I know that there was one around making sure we had a 504 policy. That we did just about this time last year. It was in June that they got adopted. So those did not fall under the state mandated policies, but I will go through and make sure that we have all of those. I do know that there are some fiscal,
There's like federal grants and things like that. We put all of those in place in the last couple of years as well.
This was more, I guess, best practices at PSU.
yeah.
Having these.
So those would probably be under recommended policies. And because this one is just required, and what I also want to do is to work with the administrative team on the recommended ones so that they can give input into shaping them before we bring them to the board. So that's why we'll do those in smaller chunks, and we make sure that we can compare what we've had, compare what the recommended ones are, and then make them more our own. So if you like, I can go through what the titles of them are. The first one is board member conflict of interest, which is a straightforward one. Legal references are on the back page. Making sure that board members do not have a fiscal conflict of interest or the appearance of one. The second, that was the only board policy in mandated policies. Section B is employees. So there's a mandated policy on substitute teachers, volunteers and work-study students, alcohol and drug-free workplace.
Before you leave the volunteer person,
Yep.
would student teachers fall under this? College students who are
They
student teachers?
fall under work-study student, post-secondary student receiving compensation for work, college or university.
A student working toward a teaching credential was placed as a student teacher. A student who does not work study student. That's what they're saying. Anyway, we'll address that when we talk about it.
Well, and I want to go through this, but then I want to ask you, I want to create a document for people to submit questions so that we can have questions answered for next meetings. So alcohol and drug-free workplace, again, it's nothing changed in any of these except putting in our school district name. Drug and alcohol testing of transportation employees. Employee harassment, this is the state model policy with some of our information included. And on this one, I need to double check with the administration. I don't have school designated employees in here. I just have principals, but we'll be putting more names in there. Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act compliance. Again, that's just the boilerplate from the state. Tobacco prohibition, not allowing any tobacco paraphernalia or sponsoring or substitutes on any of our premises. And that's it for employee required policies. You'll also notice we don't have a letterhead yet, so these will all be on a Missisquoi Valley School District letterhead. You have to create it. C are student policies. That's the most of them. There are 11. The first is education records, and again, that is just our district name inserted there. Student alcohol and drugs policy, which is very much wed to state board rule and statute. Transportation policy. I put in the name of our school district, and I put in that it is this board's decision that we will transport students. Since the Articles of Agreement agreed to the fact that we were going to continue to transport students. And that's one of the things we aren't allowed to do, is suddenly change our mind on that. I thought that was a safe thing to put in there. That, again, very boilerplate, all of these are. Limited English proficient students policy is also mandated. Firearms policy comes pretty much right out of the Guns Free Schools Act. This is mostly federal law in this policy. Participation of home study students, C6. Student attendance, which is pretty much right out of statute, and that there will be rules and procedures.
Can I ask a question about that?
Absolutely.
The student attendance, legal pupils between the ages of 6 and 16. Do we want to be bound by the ages on that?
That's the compensatory, compulsory age of education, 6 and 16. So those are the ages you have to go to school.
Okay. Not younger and not older.
Not younger and not older. It's voluntary before 6 and after 6.
There was quite a debate when the kindergartens came in.
Yeah.
Because kindergarten is required to be offered, but optional for attendance.
And it used to be 7 when I started teaching. I occasionally had students, because I taught that age level, I occasionally had kiddos that had not been to school before.
Yeah, I thought it was 5.
You had to go on your birthday.
Yeah.
When it was 7, when you became, I dealt with this in the 80s, maybe even the early 90s. And so it's now February and the child is 7.
Yeah.
Now what we do is schools have I believe it's September 1st.
Yep.
We moved that back a little at time. Previous years. Okay.
Pupil privacy rights is a required policy that's mostly about administrative responsibilities. The Federal Child Nutrition Act Wellness Policy, I did check to make sure it had the smart food language in it, which it did. That was something that we heard about. Now, this is the level that meets compliance for a required policy. Many schools will then go in and go further and do more, but this is what meets the standard for our federal nutrition program.
This is the one I remember because we had that committee about a year ago, and I
Right.
did notice this is a little bit different than what
Yes.
we have
So if there's one that my recommendation will be to adopt this one because it meets the standard, but that doesn't mean that once the board has done all of the heavy lifting on policy, that then you don't, this wouldn't be one you'd want to go back to and look at and see if we can expand it in ways that make sense, But we want to at least be able to accept our federal nutrition money. And then C10 is the prevention of harassment, tasing, and bullying of students. That's a long policy. There's also a required procedure. I did not include that, but I will make sure that it's available to everybody. And those are very clear processes in the law, so we wouldn't be wanting to change any of those. Although at the end, we have designated employees listed. And there are more, I will probably be adding some more between now and next week. And the last student one is student freedom of expression in school-sponsored media. That is a new mandated policy, so it is new to us as well.
Did you do designated employees, and I missed it?
That was connected to the.
That's connected to HHB. It's Appendix A. And that is a list of employees in the school that are trained and responsible to do investigations of hazing, harassment, and bullying of students.
So in Swanton, it's strictly guidance counselors. The other schools, they have the principals, assistant principals. I'm missing something? Is that right?
That's correct. It doesn't mean that a principal would not be able to do an investigation, and typically they're involved in investigation. So D is instruction and proficiency-based graduation requirements. I cut it down to just the paragraph that says that we have them, and they're consistent with the education quality standards. I took out all of the descriptions and the procedures around it. A lot of definitions that weren't really necessary. D3 is responsible computer network and internet use, which includes teachers and staff as well as students. Title I comparability policy is a mandated policy that's required by federal law. And animal dissection, Don, you probably remember when this went through the legislature a few years ago, that there are alternative methods for students who are opting out of animal dissection. That became a mandated policy.
Well, that one went on for a long, long time. And everybody came up with something else. Now you can go on the computer, you don't have to spell them out.
Oh, that smell.
Like
instantly filled my nostrils.
I was chair of the committee, I dissected that. Somebody brought in the
Yes.
Frogs and worms.
That's it.
Yeah.
Go away. Enjoy it,
I guess that makes me cold. Went around and dissected everybody when they were afraid. Class size policy is just a very small policy saying that we'll have procedures and they'll be consistent in what to put a number right. It's difficult to do in small districts. Title I, now we're into parent community involvement. The parental involvement policy, again, is specific to Title I schools and their receipt of Title I money, and it is how many pages long, my goodness. And it's a required policy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 pages.
For all of our schools.
But they're mostly sample compacts.
All of our schools are Title I now, but at one time they weren't all Title I. They're all Title I.
And the very last one is a non-instructional, and that's travel reimbursement. And it's stating that appropriate and reasonable expenses would be reimbursed based on actual mileage. So that's a chunk. Again, I would want you
School board
to,
meetings,
I'm sorry,
would be travel reimbursement, school board meetings.
if that follows under reasonable entities, absolutely. So, there's a lot there, but there is very little, I mean, there's very little change from the mandated policies, and those are cross-referenced with current statute and written by the attorneys through the School Board Association and others, I'm sure. They done things by a number of folks. And they are updated. So again, even some that we have are not the most recent.
Thanks for putting them off, actually.
Well, I know it's
So it
sometimes
makes
it's
good
hard.
reference material, you know.
Absolutely. So my hope would be for this group of policies that I will put together a Google document, maybe a little spreadsheet with different policy codes. And if you had questions, you can email questions into it or just send me an email about it. I'm just trying to think of a way to structure it so that we can look at them all together. And then I can bring to you any questions. I'm going to bring these to the principals this week, just so that they can have any feedback of something that was wrong to them or questions that they have. Because my hope is whether we have a committee or whether we do it as an entire board, that the administrative team can do a lot of the legwork and what's going to work in my school. And these are pretty much the law. But when we get into others, there's a lot of, well, gee, will this work in my school? What would the problems be at the high school? What were
Might
the
be
problems?
issues with
you know?
procedures or something.
Exactly, and administrators will be working on procedures, absolutely. So my hope would be that we can adopt those in one of our future meetings. We need to get them done by July.
We have to have a second reading. This is the first reading. Is it second and then third reading?
You can waive,
Second
second readings, waive first reading, which we're doing that. You could waive the reading and adopt it. But the next one would be the second reading,
Right.
and we certainly could adopt it then. The thing is if we need to set a date where we think we're going to adopt them, because in order to adopt them, I have to warn them that, say it's June 4th, our next meeting is, then I need to warn them that June 4th possible adoption. Otherwise, if we say, well, we don't know when we're going to adopt them, I can't warn them appropriately, and it sounds like we need to do this before July 1st. So I'm just wondering for your permission to put them up there as a possible adoption for the next meeting, and then if you decide you don't want to adopt them, then we can, if you have to.
I raised the issue and it comes back, and I go on to lay stuff, but we're going to get new board members on June 11th. Should they be involved with the adoption of those? I'm asking, I'm not recommending, I'm just asking. Should they be informed? We know who the candidates are, do we know? Or is it the deadline?
We don't have them in yet.
Okay, so, anyway, something to ponder whether we want to make that decision or we want to full board make that decision.
If we wait till full board though, would we then have to do a first reading again for the new board?
I mean, this board is doing business, so you can do it either way. And again, I think I would feel very differently about this if these were hand-drafted, policies with a lot of discretion in them. But your first board meeting with the full board would be on the 18th. So if you want to have that, maybe you warn them for the 4th, and then decide at that meeting whether you want to adopt them then or whether you want to wait until the 18th. As long as we have them before July 1st.
When's our next meeting? When's our next meeting?
Well, if we go with our new schedule, it would be the 21st of May. But I don't know if we can do, because we're still also operating local boards.
Yeah, Franklin's gonna be.
Yeah.
Yeah, that, okay.
I think we decided,
I thought we were
this was the
doing
second
it like-
meeting right now.
Yeah, so our next meeting would be June 4th, which is a short meeting because we're gonna have an info meeting right
Yeah.
afterwards.
So maybe we plan on doing the 18th, and we can plan for that. And if for some reason we have more, you know, we can always add another board meeting in June if we really have to.
Except that we're gonna have to space in another 10 days. If we didn't, we have to have 10 days to warn them, that's the issue. So every time you know, like, if we don't know what that date's going to be, and we decide on the 18th, well, we'll, you know, it's gonna be whatever meeting on the 18th, then
But
we'll
they
have to
have
wait.
been warned. Once they're warned once, you have to warn them every time.
I
you
think you
consider
have to
them.
warn them with the date. The date that you're going to adopt them. I don't think you can just, the fact
Well-
that it's just up there.
We can certainly talk about them on June 4th, and then plan on adopting them on the 18th. That gives you 2 times to discuss
Let's,
them.
you know, I'm not trying to win this. Let's warn them for the 4th. Let's warn them for the 4th. Knowing that we probably may not have enough time to approve it, but warn them for the 4th. And then I would ask that we, if the rest of the board agrees, that everybody who's a candidate to be elected on the 11th, receive a copy of them, or input not to necessarily to us, but to Julie or somebody, in case there's something that they're concerned about, so that they will at least be informed this is gonna happen. They won't have any legal rights, but I think it gets the word out there. So you're gonna be a board member, some of you are, and these are the policies that we need to move on. I'm not advocating, it may sound, I'm not advocating for holding off until the 18th. I mean, if that's what happens, but I have no problem moving it sooner as long as at least there are people that made aware. We give them an opportunity. If I was a candidate, I probably would care less about these policies, but at the same time, a courtesy would be to say, here they are, would you like to review them and give the superintendent input before who's like what?
I don't disagree with that. I don't know the rest of the board. It just means on the 18th, that's it. We have to do it on the 18th.
So if we have questions, make sure we should get them in before the 4th, so we can talk about anything on the 4th.
So warn it for the 4th and then
Get ready on the
That would
18th for
be
a
the
decision.
the 18th as well.
Basically, on the 4th, that would be pretty much about that date that we would say, if there were any questions, they've been resolved.
So we're gonna warn them for adoption on the 4th, and we may wait until the 18th, but
Right.
we're gonna at least try for the 4th.
That's what I'm thinking.
Okay. And I will make sure that once we get the petitions in, we'll get copies to the candidates.
They may change their mind after they get that packet of information.
If you really want to scare them.
Scare everybody off, huh?
Wait till they've signed on the dotted line.
35 pages of policies, did you take a quiz on at the first meeting? You don't have a sense of
If I wasn't laughing, I'd be crying.
Okay, so on to other business, superintendent report.
So, let me see, I was going to pull up the legislative update. We got this big one today, and I don't know, I only skimmed it, so, I know that Ways and Means definitely looked at funding sources for the lead in water bill. They still haven't finally determined the yield yet. No. They're considering that. The conference committee on H39 was disbanded. And, where's the Senate? And yet the Senate took a delay bill for special ed and put this in it. Do you know more about that than I do?
I don't think so. They,
They're delaying 173, right?
right.
Possibly.
And so they've appended their language, which puts the decision of delay onto new boards. They've appended that to
Yes. A
H1
Senate
because they
bill.
couldn't come to
That's
agreement
an
with
old
the House.
trick, put something on a bill
Right.
has to pass.
And it
Right.
hasn't passed anything, it's just
No, but-
what they did. I don't know that it would pass, because the House will be annoyed.
If there's enough on it that the House wants,
I think it's probably a tactic to get things moving one way or the other. Now, of course, I moved that over there, so now I can't see any of it.
was there anything in that, Julie, about using education fund monies
The
to
clean
clean up
water.
the lake and rivers? That's still hanging?
Is that in there?
I don't know if it was in there, but I read about it today.
I didn't read about that, Don, so I'm not familiar with that.
What they want to do is move the money that's coming in Meals and Meals to clean the water and then put some money in from, I don't know.
A new tax. They have a newly proposed tax
Online.
for, like cloud software and,
4% of meals and rooms?
Yes.
For water cleanup?
yeah, they would
efforts?
take that out of,
But there was
That-
also a new hole in the ad fund for some
Yeah,
new
there's like a
services, $4 million.
$4 million
or something, yeah.
hole.
So-
They have a supersized it.
So yes, there's a little update about that. It's not clear whether Ways and Means approach to clean water funding will be supported by the Senate or the governor.
Only one House member on the committee.
Did you say it
Voted
will
no.
be?
It's not clear that it will be,
I don't know.
which is a nice way of saying, I don't think it will be.
It's dead on the line.
Can you forward,
Absolutely.
whenever you get legislative updates or anything like that, can you forward that on to board members?
Yes, I think you get them as part of the Vermont School Board Association update. That's not the only group that gets that information. So absolutely. So there was that. And I'm gonna go back to the agenda. Things that I wanted to make sure that there's so much policy on here. I had to list them all, so. Yes. So that's one thing I wanted to ask you. I know, and I wanted to thank our administrators that were able to come today. And I told them that they did not have to come, but because the budget was going to be discussed, they wanted to come in case there were any questions. We certainly want to have the administrators as part of our board meetings, but it will be different. You know, they can't all come and sit and give a long report every meeting, every month. But we want to make sure that there's a balance. And this week I'm going to talk with the principals about some ideas of how we can do that. I talked at this meeting last week about how we could perhaps have 2 meetings a month, and one of them would be in a school. So when it's Swanton's turn, you know, Dina and Justina would be front and center and maybe given an update from their school. In person that month, hopefully student presentations as well. But we wanted to ask you, I'm making some assumptions. I'm assuming that it's important that you have administrators in your meetings, that you want to get to know them, that you want to be able to get their input. I was saying to Dan, I don't like everybody being in the audience because it feels like they're watching something instead of being a part of it. I know as an administrator it's hard to sit and watch a meeting rather than be at the table and part of it. Yet, if we were all here, there'd be a lot of us sitting around. So, and boy, at Maple Run, didn't we go through all kinds of variations of how the tables should be, and you know, there's no perfect answer, but I am assuming that you want to hear from your administrators. But I'd love to hear some of your thoughts.
I have no problem with it whatsoever. I think it's a great idea. In each school, there could be the administrators at that school that we are at. We
Yeah.
travel, so.
The only thing I have against that is that means we'd only hear from the elementary schools every fourth month.
I was just gonna ask
Or every
what that
third
would
month.
be.
I think that's kind of a big jump, especially
enough.
during the school year, because then we'd only hear from them 3 times during the school year, the whole
Well-
school year.
You've got two meetings a month.
Yes, but one meeting we were planning on doing at MDU, which would be more of our policies and kind of day-to-day operations. And then when we do the second meeting, we're going to go to the individual elementary schools and have it be more focused on the elementary schools. Which I like the idea of when we go to a whole school that they are the ones that present, but at the same time, are we neglecting the other schools by going so many months without hearing from the other schools?
I'd like to make a suggestion that we, as a board, give the school administrators, we have 4 principals, 5 principals, Dan's a principal, we elementary, give them a block of 30 minutes a month and let them work among themselves. Maybe it'd be good to pick up the phone. Dina might say, I really need 10 minutes this month, I got a lot of things I want to say. Dan might say, I got a school construction project I'd let everybody know about, I need 10 minutes some month. Some month I don't need much more than 2 or 3 minutes just to say hi, and there's a big things. But we'd have a meeting, when we have it at the school, it'd be a 30-minute block assigned to them, working with Julie, and they would work out the details. Because some months Highgate might want 10 minutes to really talk about some things that are going on. That month they get it, but the next month they might get 5 minutes. I think they should be there. I think they should be empowered. But I would like to see them have to discuss it amongst themselves. Not say, well, when you're in Franklin, you get the bulk of the time. When you're in Swanton, the time we're in Swanton, we may not want all the time. Maybe something happened the month before she'd really like to pull the board about.
So they make the request to get on the agenda.
And work with Julie. And the other thing is, I think, and again, maybe I'm off the wall, but we have the board. I think all the administrators are here, including if Laura's here or the curriculum person, principals. We all have an area, a list of tables where they all sit. And if they want to participate, then they address the chair. Well, most of us don't address the chair, we just talk about that. But anyway, address the chair. But they would be there as kind of quasi-participants. I mean, there are some things that I want to hear from the principal if they're here. But they wouldn't sit in the gallery with the public. They'd have their own administrative area. And maybe they start with Julie and Laura and the curriculum, whoever comes, and principals right down through, or if Justina comes. I personally don't expect to see Dan at every meeting because the guy has no life at all anyway. But it'd be nice to know that somebody from the high school would be there, be it Jay or Jen or an administrator. So those are my thoughts.
I really enjoyed having all of the administrators there last week. I'm not familiar with everyone, so I really appreciated it. I also had the same concern that Chris raised about not hearing enough. So I would love for them to come. I like the idea of having a set amount of time, but I'm not sure how I feel about them having to wrangle it out about who gets how much time. I don't know if I have a solution to
Julie will
that.
have to figure that out.
Oh, I've got all kinds of ideas. I know, because this is the sort of thing that we toyed with in my other district. We tried one thing, that didn't work, tried another thing. So, and this is a smart group of people. So we'll talk through some ideas and probably have a spot on the agenda for updates from principals and probably have a written report as well. Every principal writes principal report, so it'll be a big newsletter for administrative updates. So we'll find the right balance.
It'd be great too if we could, when we're at the individual schools, we get to see the students.
Yes.
Well, that that's the one I was thinking of too, is when we do visit an individual school, that'd be a great time for them to brag, bring their students forward and show off, you know, brag about what they're doing and what's working well at the time.
I'd like to hear what maybe they have for ideas, if they've got something to say.
I think that if you're looking at 2 board meetings a month, one's at MVU, I think it would be logical to have an MVU rep there.
Yeah.
And if you designated and said, okay, we'll have, you know, one other school district present, one other, like, let's say dean and president, therefore you would know that on this meeting you're going to hear from MVU and Swanton, and you would know on the other meeting that you're going to hear from Franklin and Highgate, so that each month you're hearing that voice, so that you can expect to hear from an administrator at least every month and see them. And it wouldn't be hard to work out and say, you know, we have a principal's report and maybe a student presentation, knowing full well that you're going to work within that 15 minutes or so, and then the other principal and the other administration would have 15 minutes or so. So at least you would hear from them every month. Because I would think that you would want to hear from everybody, have your pulse on what's going on, rather than waiting several months to hear. And the administrators, I think, can work out within their own building who's going to attend and what that's going to look like. We're all used to attending meetings once a month anyway, so that you're still only attending at least one a month. That's my 2 cents.
You feel comfortable coming in and being part of a table of administrators?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we used to do that in our regular board meetings anyway,
Right.
so yeah. We sat at the table.
I just know what it feels like. It feels different when you're sitting at a table engaging to when you're sitting back in the audience. Maybe somebody will ask me a question like you just did, right? So it feels different. As a principal, I can only imagine it feels different. So we want these to be our board meetings for our schools and our district, not, you know, the business office and the superintendent's meetings with the board, because it's just going to be different. So we have to make sure those relationships, as you said, you don't know all the principals from your other schools. And I'd also like to start by doing tours of the buildings too.
Like
Maybe
that.
for MVU, we do it in 2. I don't know. Get out
One
to
part of the building one day.
do animal science another time. Yeah, but I think that would be nice to do, so that everybody gets to know what's.
I want to see the lunch program.
No. Oh yeah, it's an opportunity to feed the board members when it's your turn too. That's very important.
Do you ever
Unwritten
agree on
rule.
what time our meetings are going to start? 6:30?
6:30.
6:30. Yep. Okay, so, and the last thing I wanted to bring up is the fact that the Vermont School Board Association training for board chairs and superintendents is next Wednesday. I did not sign up because I didn't know who to invite. And I also know that this is your busy season, so it is not something I expected anybody would necessarily have time to do, but if somebody is interested, let me know and we can see if we can get that, if it's too late or not too late.
I've been through it, it's been a long time, but if Megan aspires maybe someday to be a chair, it'd be good to know and the ropes.
The food is good.
Where is it?
It's in Lake Maury.
Oh.
Now I have to go anyway the next day for the superintendent's meeting, but I went last year, and Father Rob was there. It was a good way to meet Father Rob and introduce myself to a board member. But
This
So-
isn't the workshop that typically happens at.
it's the one day. It's
University.
not like the fall one
Okay.
where that's the School Board Association conference. It's a couple of days. This one is board member training.
I am interested in attending.
Okay.
I have to work out my schedule first.
All right, I will book it, and anybody else who's interested, because it's mandated.
There's more
that
than
you-
one person you know, right?
Yes.
So I know, that's great.
So please let me know if you're sending, it should be an email, and I'll see if I can get it arranged. And if they say the inn is full, then I will let you know, but I doubt it.
Okay.
It's too bad it's on May 15th, when, you know, our new board members would probably benefit from that as well.
Yeah, it is next week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, on to discussing executive session, Don's.
Okay, what I want to say, I think I'll wait till we have a full board. I just think that as a board, as a new board, we're going to be dealing with a lot of issues that maybe aren't familiar to all of us, because I've never worked in Franklin and I never worked in Highgate. And I think there's information that we're going to have information for in executive session. So let's wait till we get a full board. There's nothing alarming. I just would like to sit and go through, have Julie go through the conditions that allow you to go into executive session, that type of thing. We're all familiar with them. I won't speak only for myself, but I've abused them at times over the years. I've tried not to in the last 20 years, but I remember earlier times it got pretty sloppy. And then I became kind of a bulldog on the other end, kind of saying, why are we going to executive session every month? So I think we struck a good balance in this district, but I just think it doesn't hurt any of us to have a good review with Julie talking to us about things or anything she gets from our lawyers. But we don't need to do it tonight. We'll have a full board.
Okay, so we'll table that until June 18th. Let's see, future meeting dates. Our info meeting for the warrant articles will be June 4th, 7 p.m. here at the MVU Library. And our election date will be June 11th. And it will be Australian ballot, 7 to 7. Swamp Complex, the Franklin Town Hall, and we haven't asked permission yet, but most likely Highgate will do it in the arena again. So we don't.
I think Wendy did care.
She did. Okay, so it will be.
I called all the clerk's offices.
In addition to the info meeting on the 4th, we're meeting beforehand, is that
Yes,
correct?
our next meeting is June 4th.
Do you want to make that at 6 o'clock?
I was just going to say
instead
we
of
should move that up to
6:30?
6, seeing as that we have the info meeting right after the.
Is that enough time?
Policy
An hour?
one. Policy one.
I
People
don't.
can get here
Yeah, that's the
earlier
hard part.
than
I
sure.
don't think people can get here before
And that's here.
6. Here.
Is that good, Dan?
You're going to use just this library space?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have a lot of folding chairs.
You need more chairs?
We could.
Okay.
Because there's something going on there that night, right?
That's what I'm looking for. The only possible thing we've got going on, and I'll have to double check, but I don't see it on the calendar here, is High School Sports Awards night. But I believe that's on Monday the 3rd, so I think you're okay for the 4th. Should be good.
Yeah, we don't want to compete against sports
Mhm.
workers. I'll look for a motion to adjourn at 8:19.
Excuse me, Doug, can we just recap those dates? 6 for Tuesday, 6 o'clock info meeting at MVU.
No, 6 o'clock is our next board meeting at MVU. At 7 o'clock on 6/4 is the info meeting
gotcha.
for the budget warrant articles. And then June 11th is our voting day for
Got it.
And the 18th would be,
and the 18th is our next board meeting after the full.
And that's with the full,
And that would be
9.
with the full 9-member
And where is that?
board. It'd be
Probably.
right? It'd be their turn.
we haven't done a rotation or anything.
I thought that started in July.
We may want to just have it here until we agree on a schedule for the
Okay.
next school
So
year.
we'll keep meeting here until, and that once we have a full board, we'll set a schedule where, and a rotation for school. So June 18th, 6:30 here at the MVU Library.
That's okay.
Once again, I'll look for a motion to adjourn at 8:20.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning at 8:20, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried 6-0. We are adjourned.
Thank you, everybody. I know that was a